All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Orange Crush podcast presented by Chick-fil-A. Guys, thank you as always for the support. Got some big stuff on the way for this show, so just stay tuned on that front. We have been cranking it. We've been rocking and rolling. David, it's been a busy week in Tiger Town. I hope you are staying warm. We got a little snow. How have you been? It's been kind of crazy.
Well, we went out yesterday for baseball, and that was probably my 16th consecutive, hey, go out for the first day of baseball practice. And that's the coldest. I mean, temperatures in the, mid 30s, but we had fun. Jazz Chisholm of the New York Yankees was out there with Coach Erik Bakich. A lot of momentum going with baseball. The signing was absolutely ridiculous. The cool swag that they have. Cold weather, but it lets us know warmer weather's on the way.
Hopefully so. And a team that we'll be talking about later that is turning up the temperature is Clemson Basketball, but we'll be talking about them later on in the program. But we're going to start, David. It's been a busy week for recruiting. And, there's last couple of weeks have been really pivotal for this staff. And I saw it on our TigerNet boards yesterday was an appreciation post for Matt Luke. And something that I'll be posting and writing about is just the job that he continues to do on the recruiting trail. Just this week, 2 new Tigers or potential Tigers in the 2026 class. Maxwell Riley and Adam Guthrie just announced that Clemson is in their final lists. Guthrie has Clemson in his top 3, and Maxwell Riley in Ohio and Avon Lake has them battling it out with the Ohio State Buckeyes, who just won a national championship. Just so much to cover on the recruiting trail. But what really stands out to me is just the consistency. And it looks like there's some priority targets being simmered down. You start to see repeat guests. Dabo Swinney's coming with several other people. It's sort of like fascinating to watch. It's sort of like the lottery of who's going to be where, how many miles have been used. Hopefully they have maybe a quick trip card that they've been handing out at the basketball games. Feels like they've been burning some miles in the air, going all over the place.
And Matt Luke has something to sell, because as good as it is for Clemson that all of these offensive linemen return, Tristan Lee, Ryan Linthicum, Walker Parks, Blake Miller. The bad news out of all that is they're all gone after this year. So Matt Luke's out on the recruiting trail, and he's selling playing time, because there's some other guys that have, been. Colin Sadler, is a guy that's not got a lot of time left. I mean, he's able to go out there and sell playing time for a team that's probably going to make a run at a, college football playoff berth again next year. And that's a big thing to sell these days, because these kids want to come in and they want to play right away. And that's one good way to get some big-time offensive linemen in there. And he is doing, as we would say back in the old days, yeoman's work out on the recruiting trail. We knew he would. He's a good recruiter. He's a personable guy. And, the offensive line, the proof is in the pudding. They were a lot better last year.
Yeah, you have sort of a formula to sell with Clemson's offensive line, where in 2023 It was a massive weakness for this group. And now it's the big strength. On top of that, in his first year, you're able to sort of pin hey, they made the college football playoff back under part of my leadership. And I feel like that's pretty powerful to be able to say that Clemson hasn't been able to really throw out on the recruiting trail for the last couple of years. Is this is a playoff team once again. And you go to 2025 and the retention that they had. And this has always been something, David, at the back of my mind when it comes to recruiting specifically, is how much the transfer portal plays a role in college football these days. And of course, Clemson has now been using it a little bit, but not as much as other programs. But the retention that you and I have been talking about how important it was to this staff to get going, just with your experience on this recruiting trail, you've been doing this a long time. How important now is that Clemson's retaining a lot of these guys and keeping them here? How important is that to maybe recruits on the home trail going, yeah, this is a place that I could call home, and they're not going to ship me out to the transfer portal and send me to Utah?
I'm glad you said that. That's actually a great segue with the national championship being played earlier this week. This is a chance to network, to talk to a lot of different people, a lot of people engaged, coaches, soon to be college general managers, athletic directors, and some great conversations have taken place. And I'm glad you said that. One thing that I have learned is that the transfer portal this year lacking in talent as opposed to the first couple of years. Not the high-end guys or the depth of high-end guys that we've seen. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that programs are now more invested in keeping their guys and understanding that retention is important. And, we go back to Dabo Swinney. Everybody kind of knew parting ways with Wes Goodwin, but, his first, item of business was let me try and retain my current team. And so the thought going forward is that the best teams are going to be the ones that retain their players and will go into the transfer portal for a few key pieces, whether that's 3 or 4 or 2 or maybe 7. But I don't think you're going to see the good teams going and getting 19, 20, and 21 anymore. And you simply can't lose that many and expect to compete. So the best teams are going to recruit high school players. They're going to develop them. They're going to keep them. And then they are going to augment that with players from the portal. And guess what? That's kind of what Dabo Swinney has decided to do.
And I think from this national championship, of course, both quarterbacks were from the transfer portal, Riley Leonard and Will Howard. But a lot of what Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman have been doing is that homegrown stuff. And you have guys like Jeremiah Smith is the best player in college football. He's homegrown. Obviously, he's a freshman, so he hasn't had much time to decide whether he would want to go in the portal or not. But I think he would start on a variety of NFL teams if he were able to do the one-and-done rule. The kid is absolutely ridiculous, wins the national championship for the Buckeyes. But that model that you sort of illustrate, in the back of my mind, I'm going, that's Clemson's model. That's sort of how they've been doing it, particularly this year, where you have retention every single spot. You have TJ Parker, Cade Klubnik, Peter Woods coming back, and then you have the couple added spots in the portal. I feel like on the recruiting trail, that's a powerful message to say we were doing it before it was cool. And now you have the sort of extended season depth is going to be an important thing for these teams moving forward. That's what lost Georgia, that game in the Sugar Bowl, that Notre Dame was able to manhandle that offensive line that was down a few starters. And obviously you had Carson Beck out, but I don't think he's a massive difference maker. Miami fans will find out soon enough. But yeah, I think this has been a pretty successful couple weeks for Clemson when it comes to the recruiting trail. Talked to a couple targets in this 2026 class saying that, hey, this model that Clemson has, it means something to me. And I remember having one of my first earlier conversations with Ryan Mosley at Carrollton and saying that the lack of usage of the transfer portal was important to him because he knows that he's not going to get shipped out if things don't work out immediately in a year. And that patience and development that Sweeney's always preached might end up being the thing that circles around. These things always have a way of circling back to the sort of the median. The pendulum always will balance out.
Right.
And Clemson's way seems to be the popular way. At least it's trending that way in my mind.
It is. It is. And, it's funny. Dabo kind of proves he knows what he's doing again. Now, did he have to come on board with adding pieces in the portal? He did. We knew that. And I think something before we move on that really stood out to me in his press conference where he introduced Tom Allen. And, people are like, oh, he only hires he does the nepotism hires, whether it's former players or family. And, everybody's of, the opinion he only goes and gets Daniel players or whatever. And Chapel Fowler of the state, who does a fantastic job, asked him, said, well, your last 5 hires have all kind of been outside your family tree. Nick Eason played at Clemson. Chris Rumpf was here before. But, you go get Matt Luke, you go get Tom Allen, a couple of former head coaches. So you go get Garrett Riley. So last 5 hires outside the family tree. Is that, purposeful? And he said something really interesting. He said, look, I make mistakes. Go ask Kath, his wife. I'm human. And he said, everything that I do, I think is the right decision. And I will always put the program first. And he said, I've made internal hires that have worked out. Jeff Scott, Tony Elliott. I have made external hires that have worked out. Brent Venables, Chad Morris. I have made external hires that have not worked out. I have made internal hires that have not worked out. But I'm always going to do what's best for the program. But I do think there's been a little bit of a sea change in maybe not investing so much inside the family, but going and getting experience, guys. I had that really neat, to me, stat that I figured out after he hired Goodwin and Lemansky Hall was coming on staff and Brandon Streeter and Kyle Richardson and CJ Spiller. and it was that last national championship team, 206 total years of experience as full-time assistant coaches on that team. And then the team that he had in 2022, 56 years.
Ooh, quite the sharp drop.
And you go, huh? And a lot of that was Mike Reed.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you're looking at it and you go, man, this is not good. Not good at all. And I think Dabo, maybe more so than hiring family, because those guys don't have experience, hiring experience.
Yeah, and you get fresh ideas in the room, and sort of how everyone sits at the dinner table and you sort of trade how your days went. Everybody's going to have a different story. And so I think for this Clemson staff now, you have someone like Matt Luke, who was at Georgia. You have Garrett Riley, who was at TCU. And I think a common thread among these hires is all of these coaches are coming from some sustained success, where
Right.
Garrett Riley at a national championship, Matt Luke led Kirby Smart, or helped lead Kirby Smart to his first national title. Tom Allen, just fresh off of a semifinal appearance, where probably better quarterback play gets you in the national championship. So you're going to have these coaches coming in with different ideas, new runs, different conferences. And so you get to sort of maybe copy things a little bit. It's a copycat league. Everyone's trying to replicate each other, whether it was replicating Saban's identity, replicating the Swinney family over factory vibe that players have told me reminds them of. That was back in the day of the 2016 era. Or you have the Ryan Days now, or the Kirby Smart formula. So everyone's trying to pick apart each other. And now that you have sort of a staff that's such a diverse in terms of location, it's going to be really fascinating to see how it all comes together under that leadership. And different ideas means different perspective stories. Ben Boulware on the recruiting trail gets to sort of be your fiery spokesman. There was one coach I'd want to see in that recruiting room with a family. I'd want to see Boulware. Just see what he says. Maybe if he's really fired up, the same fiery personality. If you got one different than that, please share. But Boulware's one that I'd pay a lot of money to see that.
I just go back to that championship game against Alabama, 2016. Alabama has a big third down play, and you can see Boulware jumping around and gesticulating and gesturing. And he told me later that he had an entire yellow notepad filled with notes from preparing for that football game. And when he saw Alabama come out in that formation, he knew what they were going to run. He told everybody else what they were going to run. And Alabama still ran the play, and he shut it down. That's who he is. And if they can pass that along, man, these linebackers are going to be a lot better. You feel good about having him in the room. And, speaking of feeling good about having somebody in the room, how about having Chase Hunter in the room for a basketball team that just continues to win?
Yeah, you texted me that night after the Syracuse win, just elite play from Chase Hunter.
Elite. Yeah.
I think I wrote about it in October before the season started, was that Chase Hunter, in order for this team to be successful, they were going to have to they'd have to go as far as Chase Hunter was willing to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wondered after that run in LA, was that where Chase Hunter was the number one option for that offense, where PJ Hall struggled with foul trouble? It was a tough shooting stretch for Gerard. Was Hunter's number one option? Was that a flash in the pan, or was that a promising sign of things to come? And it looks like it was the latter, where Hunter has played out of his mind. He's certainly an all-ACC lock in my mind, and I think a lot of other writers' estimations, they see him as someone that's going to be in that list. The ACC's leader in three-point percentage. He was a 31% three-point shooter last year. He's a 45% three-point shooter now. That's a ridiculous jump in basketball for anybody that's listening. That blows my mind at how efficient you can be in the course of a couple months. And these kids don't have a lot of time to sit on a beach and vacation. It's back to work for Brownell and these guys.
Well, what's important too is the fact that, when you get to tournament time, what do you hear all the time? What is the most important thing that you can have on a basketball team as they head into the NCAA tournament? And it's not, you got to have a great big man. They have to have good guard play. And how about Clemson right now? Because Jaden Zachary, whether he is scoring or not, along with Chase Hunter, Jake's been coming off the bench, providing some of the three-point ability that he has. Dylan Hunter has been playing well. Clemson has really good guard play.
Absolutely. Jaden Zachary, I've said multiple times, whether it's on TigerNet, Twitter, that Jaden Zachary is one of the more impressive on-ball defenders that I've seen in quite some time, just with my own two eyes. I know that there's plenty of good ones out there, but when you go from last year where it's more of Gerard, Chase Hunter, it feels more offensively leaning. This year it feels like, hey, we need Jaden Zachary to sort of take the load off of it defensively for Chase Hunter. Brownell mentioned it after the Syracuse win that Hunter was guarding a lot of the top options last year.
Yeah.
So you have sort of a tread on your tires when you enter March. And obviously Hunter, it worked out pretty well for him. But now you have Jaden Zachary who's able to maybe shoulder that responsibility a little bit more. And you can still get a good, reliable 10 to 12 out of him every night. And so it's a duo that's worked out pretty well. I wasn't sure at the beginning how it was going to maybe mesh together, but it seems like it's the best of both worlds. And then you add Shefflin's play, who's starting to recover from the back spasms that he's dealt with. Lock-in is returned to form. But David, I think you mentioned guard play. Dylan Hunter has been a really great surprise for me, someone that has really stepped up on the defensive side. There was a night where he had 6 steals on a night where Clemson was just poking the ball around everywhere. But his toughness stood out to me and stood out to Brownell. Really praised him and Lockett on the road against Pittsburgh as just saying these kids that are super, and I use the word gritty, sort of on the nose there. And then Del Jones, twitchy, really fun athlete to watch. When he's on, he's really on. And this rotation's starting to lean a little bit smaller, but I think it's benefited them for the most part this year.
Yeah, they have. And, it's been important that they've had this big stretch because Ian Shefflin has been battling some back pain. And, he's still really good. He's still, I think, second in the league in rebounding, right under 10 a game. Maxime Reynaud from Stanford, he has been kind of incredible. But this is a Clemson team that has the pieces. And if you can get him healthy, get Victor Lock, and he's been doing well, man, they've got the pieces, the great guard play, Chase Hunter with the great play that he has had. I mean, all of a sudden you go, man, this team is poised. But, you've done a great job covering them. Clemson now has, kind of an interesting schedule coming up. It's going to be a big few weeks for them. Tell us what, the Tigers have tomorrow.
Yeah, they got a matchup in Blacksburg and the Castle. That place looks like a fortress. It was fun to go visit that in November. Shout out to Brandon Rink for dealing with me as I kept pointing things out, going, oh, let's go see that thing on that road trip. But getting to see the Castle and sort of that's been a historical house of horrors for Clemson. But these next couple weeks before Duke, it's sort of the 2 weeks of landmines where you have Georgia Tech again. It's a 9 p.m. tip. You have Virginia Tech on the road. There's going to be some parts where you sort of hesitate a little bit. You have NC State on the road before Duke. And all these teams on paper aren't as good as Clemson this year. And then you have the big dog, Duke, Cooper Flag, coming into Little John Saturday, February 8th, excuse me. I think that's sandwiched in between. You have Duke and UNC sandwiched in between the Super Bowl. So it's going to be a great sports weekend if you're a Clemson basketball fan, as long as you don't hate the Kansas City Chiefs that might be in the Super Bowl here in a couple of weeks. But, David, it's a team that
Bills.
I think –
Go Bills.
Yeah, or the Bills.
Go Bills. Go Bills.
I think, David, and this might be a hot take. You throw me off with the Bills thing. Shout out to my comp professor, big Bills fan. I think this team might have a potential to be, and it's tough because the result that you'd have to be quote unquote better than the team from last year is a Final Four appearance maybe. But I think this team has the capability to be better than last year's group. I really do. I think there's a right combination. The bench play is starting to mold into form. Obviously, I think PJ Hall and Gerard as a duo really just encapsulated what made that group last year special. But I think with Shefflin stepping up, Chase Hunter playing like an all-ACC guard, and then you have different combinations of Hyde Breeder, Del Jones, Dylan Hunter. This team just feels a little bit different than last year's, where people forget this team was 4-6 in the ACC around this time of year, and that UNC win really catapulted and saved that season. This team is riding. It's a team that's consistently getting better each game that I watch them, and I've been waiting for that landmine game, David, and it hasn't really come yet. It could come tomorrow. It's Friday as we're recording this, but so far this team has really avoided that just catastrophic loss, and that's a big credit to this group in Brownell.
And I think that the schedule treats them really, really well right now, too. You've got the game at Virginia Tech. Then they're off a week. Then you go up to NC State. Don't play again at home until February 4th against Georgia Tech, and then that big home game against Duke. So, they can get Shefflin healthy. And, every season is its own. Do they have to outdo last year's team? Not real sure. But because we're hitting the 20-minute mark, let's segue. Let's use that as a segue.
Yeah.
Clemson baseball wants to beat last year's mark. This is a team that wants to go, from a regional to a super regional to Omaha. We were out there yesterday, and this is a confident bunch. And, I asked somebody, I said, no BS, nothing for the media here. This team isn't good enough to go to Omaha. And I was told, hey, unless the coaching screws it up or there are a lot of injuries, they should go to Omaha. And I like hearing that. You've got a freshman pitcher by the name of Dane Moeller, whose dad, I covered him when he was playing in the majors. Shows how old I am. They really like him, freshman pitcher. They feel like the offense is going to be there. And I just keep going back, and I've told you a number of times, this is good. 2025 is going to be a fun year. Basketball is going to make a run. I think baseball is going to make a run. Football is going to be really good. We'll see what softball has to offer. But I'm excited about baseball getting started. They're going to start at Globe Life Field in that 6-team tournament out there, the Shriners Classic. Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, home of the Texas Rangers. They get to play Oklahoma State, who's got a really good pitcher, on that Friday. They get, Ole Miss on Sunday, Arizona on Saturday. Texas is also in that tournament, Arkansas. It's going to get going. And we asked Erik Bakich yesterday. He is suspended for the first 2 games. And he said he's either going to be in the bar drinking, and then he was like, haha, I'm joking, maybe. Or, maybe I can be in the radio booth if I'm allowed to be in the stadium. But a lot of excitement and momentum around Clemson baseball.
Absolutely. And I think for Bakich, it was sort of he was so loose yesterday and just having such a great time. And obviously that includes the absolutely ridiculous partnership, getting to be around Jazz Chisholm, the Yankees star, was just recently in the World Series, which is just sort of those moments where you go, this is the job. This is crazy. This is a loaded team. This is a team that I think still the pitching staff's going to be a question mark for me, is how they round that out and how they build around Canuck, who's your ace in that situation. But this is an offensive lineup where your starting 9 is going to be really good, but you're going to have some players maybe sitting on the bench that are pretty talented. So this is a team that, and Bakich alluded to this as well, is there's not a spot for everybody. And there's some really talented players on this roster that probably aren't going to get as much playing time, but that depth may serve them well heading into the season. Obviously with Canarella, he said he is at 85% with his injury, but once the baseball season, once they get onto the field and start taking stuff that way, he's going to be 100%. He's going to be ready to go. I did ask him about the transfer class, and he sort of chuckled at me and said, well, what more could you ask for? And was just being it was the most soft-spoken, brutally honest answer of, it's just the example of, dude, we're loaded, and that's all I got. It's his way of doing it.
Andrew Chufo is a big piece of this, the shortstop. Remember, hit the home run that beat South Carolina last year, then tore his knee. And he said he is 100% lateral movement's great. You have to be strong up the middle. Chufo, Canarella, these guys coming off of injury, they should be really good. And Chufo told me that they feel like they have 15 guys that could be in the starting 9.
Pretty good embarrassment of riches to have.
That's pretty good. And that's why I say, is there enough pitching? Yeah, they like Dane Moeller, but they've got some guys. Another name, Jacob McGovern, is a guy that I was talking to Erik about it yesterday. Not overwhelming stuff, just seems to miss bats. And even in some of their scrimmages and in the fall, continues to miss bats. And those are the kind of guys you like to have. I'm excited. They do get that season started here in a few weeks. And I think I'm going to go to Texas.
Like the second time in a couple months for you. That's going to be pretty fun.
I'm going to be Davey Crock. The rest of you can go to Hades. I'm going to Texas.
Doesn't it remind you, though, of the beginning of basketball season where the tournaments select the best teams. We're like, these are the guys we want out here for the big tournaments to start the year.
Yeah.
It's sort of as a recognition for how Clemson has grown for the last couple of years of, we think you're elite. You need to be in the big boys tournament to start the year.
Oh, absolutely. And number one, I love being in a baseball stadium. I love being in a Major League Baseball stadium. Never been to Globe Life Field. I have been, kind of around it. I've been on the outside of it. But man, they have got some studs on that Oklahoma State team. They've got a fireball and pitcher that I'm sure Clemson is probably going to face. And it should be fun. I'll get to eat some Mexican food again and sit in a Major League ballpark with my kids. And we'll see what Clemson has to offer.
And we'll see what this rest of January has to offer, as well as the rest of the winter and the spring. And we can't wait for more things to unveil on this podcast. Guys, thank you for this just housekeeping episode, feels like. We covered Clemson recruiting, basketball, baseball, all that stuff. Crossover season is at its highest peak, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Stay warm and take care. God bless.